Coming up on today's show.
I had a picture of of a mountain lion, and it looked like a giant male. I mean, it was a big, broad-shouldered mountain lion.
Looking at that property and you say, this is going to be the sanctuary. Are you looking mainly like for bedding cover?
Large portion of your property to be generally undisturbed, especially come mid-August, then on.
Broadcasting from the Mid-Migration Outfitter Studios, this is the Finding Fur and Feathers Hunting Podcast. How much direction are you getting from the governor?
Minnesota DNR had reintroduced him into this area.
I don't know, maybe you didn't want me to tell the story on the show, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
I knew you were going to go there.
Come and close the entire hunting season.
Oh,
so that's
really?
pretty easy.
The Finding Fur and Feathers Hunting Podcast is brought to you by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Today's show is brought to you by Haybale Heights on Devil's Lake. Visit haybaleheights.com for more. By Tazen Lake Lodge in Northwest Saskatchewan. For Trophy Lake Trout Northern Pike, go to tazenlake.com. By Otter Tail County. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. And by Lake of the Woods Tourism. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. All right, welcome to the show. I'm Bret Amundson. The bow opener here in Minnesota is coming up on the 19th. What's the season going to look like? We're going to talk whitetails on this week's show. We've got Taylor Bestor from the Bluffland Whitetails Association and also Tyler Scott, who's been involved in quality deer management himself. Both these guys spend a lot of time chasing deer around. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks.
Glad to join you.
Now I'm excited to hunt this year because I just haven't had much time to bow hunt the last couple of years, and my freezer's been a little bit empty. So any big doe might want to steer clear of my stand on opening day. I'm just saying that right now, and that's one thing I want to talk to you guys a little bit about. As far as, what you guys think might be the best options when it comes to a guy that wants to just put meat in his freezer, big does, younger does, small bucks, cull bucks, whatever. We'll get into stuff like that. We'll also get into food plots and land management, chronic wasting disease, and more. And first of all, Taylor, with chronic wasting disease going the way it is, it's basically made things more difficult for antler point restriction, hasn't it?
Yeah, this year they made the decision to, suspend it indefinitely, I think it was phrased as. And, with the science of what we know about it, we're understanding of it. But at the same time, I mean, that was one of our milestones in our organization, kind of put us on the map. So it's tough to see go, but talking with guys, it seems like they're on the same page that it's tough to see go, but when you hear that, you got to figure they're going to practice it with or without the regulations. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Do you think that'll make a difference?
I feel like it's going to be one of them things where it's not going to be immediate. Like maybe next year we're not going to notice that there's a significant drop in good bucks out there, but it's probably going to have an effect, and others are concerned as well about that. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see.
Tyler, were you someone that would have liked to have seen antler point restriction increase across other areas of the state?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question, of course. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen that migrate north up towards our area. And I felt like that east Otter Tail area was going to be that next jump if we were going to jump out of the southeast corner of the state. I mean, because I think we've been sitting in envy up here for the last 6, 7, 8 years after the first couple of years that was enacted down there. And Taylor, to get to your point, I think a guy's mindset down there, the first couple of years was a little bit challenging for a lot of those landowners to adopt that antler point restriction. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was it on for 10 years?
I think that's about right. Yep.
So you got 10 years of people having to change the way they hunt. And man, I got to believe that's going to carry over for you guys moving forward, which is a huge deal. I mean, it's all about changing mindset to what one's going to harvest and having the restraint not to harvest a particular deer. And unfortunately, in our society, when there's rules, hopefully tend to follow them. But when there's no rules and it's open game, unfortunately, people get trigger happy, and you guys were a great litmus test to what can happen in a state that's been predominantly motivated by shooting the first antlered deer that walks by. So I hope that mindset carries forward for you guys, and then we can see that management practice is still moving forward.
But I think it's interesting that I got both you guys on the show this week, and that's obviously by design. But when you think about big deer in Minnesota, everybody immediately thinks of the southeast. But Otter Tail County's kind of there's a lot of big deer up there too, isn't there?
There is, and there's pockets of really good deer hunting. There is still a lot of landowners and older generation people who are wanting to harvest a deer that has antlers on it. They don't care the size. And so for those of us landowners who are trying to, talk about, managing the entire herd itself, doe management, allowing especially that 1.5-year-old deer to survive. It's tough for some, and unless you own 1,000 acres or more, you can't do it on your own. And so you do need that cooperative of landowners to be able to successfully manage a great age structure of deer. And when you guys have an APR enacted, it kind of forces your entire neighborhood to hunt within those restrictions. So
yeah, how do you go about talking to your neighbors? If you were to give somebody advice, if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey man, I got a nice buck on camera, but he could use another year, but I'm a little worried that he's going to wander onto the neighbor's property and get shot on, first morning of the gun season or something." What do you recommend to that person as far as going around and trying to talk to the neighbors about that?
Taylor, I'll let you take that one. I'm curious to see what you have to
say. This year, I've kind of gone outside the box and went to my neighbors with trail cam pictures, because we actually had a decent buck with a drop tine, which is kind of a first for our farm, and talked to them about harvesting does. And I've kind of massaged this thing for a few years, and it's I think it's starting to click, because this is what I'm seeing by what we've been doing with management over the years. And they always bring it up where it's, we're worried if we let it go by that the neighbor's going to shoot it. Well, I tell them that's what we've been doing. And, one out of the other, 1 out of 2 ain't crossing the fence. So I think it's starting to click with them. My intent is to visit them on opening weekend deer camp and just kind of brush over things. And, you can't go in too hard with it, because they're going to, get defensive, and that's about it for that conversation. So that's how I'm handling it this year.
So it's a kind of piggyback back in 2006 when we first got our neighborhood together around the Pelican Rapids area to try to get a QDM branch established. That's a tall task, especially in an area where you don't have APR and you've got ingrained ideation of just killing deer. And so it started off with a couple of us, and we got the whole neighborhood together for a giant potluck. And the excitement level was really high those first couple of years. I think everybody probably experiences a similar type atmosphere in the sense that, people want to get together, they want to talk deer hunting. But it's been a challenge when it really comes down to it, as far as the restraint of not harvesting particular deer. I mean, it's a challenge. And so I would say in our particular area, if you've got, this might, to the serious deer managers out there, a 3.5-year-old deer is a good deer. That's going to be the biggest deer a lot of people have ever killed, especially in our area. And so the goal has always been just let that 1.5-year-old deer go, because essentially you just try and play the numbers game. And if you get all those deer to 2.5, that increases their odds of surviving. They get a little bit smarter, a little bit more nocturnal. We all kind of know how the game works, but that's been a tough go of it. And as the years have gone by, I feel like our numbers of 2.5-year-old and 3.5-year-old deer that are making it through are way better than they were beforehand. So I'm not saying what we did was totally useless, because it really has helped. It's definitely going to be a generational thing. And then a few years back here, we acquired some property over by that Deer Creek, Bluffton area, and we're in a little pocket where there is still a lot of traditional deer hunting going on. And I'm new to that area. I didn't grow up there, and so going into that extremely soft is definitely a challenge. And talking to your neighbors, feeling them out, and just it's been a real slow pace, which is by design. Like you say, you can't come in too strong, or you're going to totally turn everybody off. I would say my number one goal right now is just doe management. We've got such a high deer density over there, and getting people on board with the idea of, hey, just shoot some does, fill your tag, have some fun with some does, and not having to wait to shoot a 2.5-year-old deer, even though some of these guys have killed a 2.5-year-old deer for 10 years running, and so it's tough, it's a challenge, but you got to go in at soft. You can't go in headstrong, or you're gonna lose that battle.
Well, what about that guy that says, I want to put some meat in my freezer and I can't get a doe, he's a gun hunter, I can't get a doe tag. What do you say to that guy that maybe has just likes to shoot it to eat it,
Yeah, for me, to each their own, we got to have hunters out there.
Yeah.
If they have the ability, the little bit of willingness, some evidence you can show, I think that's the best route of tackling that discussion.
Well, let's talk about for the meat hunter, like as I kind of brought up earlier, because I'm all about shooting a doe on opening day just so I can put some meat in my freezer. Now, I've had some people say, well, you got to keep the does around because that brings the bucks around, and then you have some people say, well, you don't want to shoot the big does because of this and that. So there's a few different schools of thought in there. It's always fun talking about whitetail with people because everybody has different opinions on it, it seems like, and everybody's opinion is right, of course. When it comes to, somebody that just wants to stick a deer to put in his freezer, what do you guys say? What do you guys tell that person to look for when they're out there in the stand?
Well, I would say shooting a doe, number one. If you aren't worried about your deer numbers, definitely shoot a doe. If they are worried about, well, if I shoot that doe, that could potentially be 2 more deer the following year, especially if you get into the November and she's potentially bred already. It's like, well, you're killing 3 deer. So if you're really worried about deer numbers, then do your best to scope out that yearling fawn. I mean, that fawn who is coming into that fall, and obviously it's a smaller deer, but that deer's most likely is not going to be bred. Of course, they will be bred, especially later on in the estrus cycle. But that's a very tasty treat. If you can shoot a year or this year's fawn, especially later in November as they start to pack on a little bit more weight, that's a tasty treat. But again, I would have some restraint, especially shooting a buck during November. You aren't going to shoot a good tasting buck when they've been running hard, in comparison to a doe, I should say, and it ultimately comes down to how it's handled in the field and how you handle it when you get home, whether or not you like to hang it or not in the correct temperatures. I mean, it all plays into it, but a doe is definitely going to taste better than a buck, especially later in the year.
Yeah, that's a great point. For me, down in the southeast here, plenty of deer. I think it's pretty easy for someone to go the doe route if they want. So again, back to the tread lightly. I'm willing to shoot some people some does too, so I get a kick out of that.
Yeah. So ultimately, it can depend on where you are and what your numbers are, where you're at, but realistically, shooting one of those does is the way to go. I can't wait. I'm so excited. It's been 3 years, guys. I don't even like telling people that.
Crazy.
I'm embarrassed. Well, I got out, because I do. It's embarrassing. I've been guiding waterfowl the last couple of years, so September and October gets pretty busy, and November things get good, and then I like to pheasant hunt too, so that takes up quite a bit of my bow hunting time, because I can I can just run out for a shorter amount of time. There's less time required for pheasant hunting than there is for bow hunting. It just gets tough. But the last few years, I've been finally getting ready in about the back half of December. That's when I like to bow hunt, which is, it's nice and warm but I've been moving, and I moved last year, and I moved to some new property, and so I wasn't able to bow hunt it until late in the season, and there was deer all over the place, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was putting it off almost. Like, I can just go out there and whack a doe anytime I want to. This is gonna be a piece of cake. And I had a trail camera up for a month, and I had deer all over the trail camera, and then the day I put my stand up is the last day I had deer on the camera. And I talked to the landowner, and he goes, yeah, about this time of year, the deer all migrate out and they go down over here and move to another property. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that a week ago? So I froze my butt off sitting in a stand late in the year last year. But, we also I've got another new property that has some really nice deer on it. And we're kind of in that situation now where, do we try to give these deer another year? It's surrounded by other deer hunters. So, we haven't had a chance to talk to the neighbors. So that's why I wanted to ask you guys about that. But Tyler, you said you're hunting a new area now. Is that what you said? Or you're in a new place?
We acquired some land, it'd be 4 years ago, this November. And so that's been what's been keeping me busy for the last few years, mainly. But then you talked about, if we get into habitat improvement, I tell you what, that's become a newfound passion. Especially there was a little bit of an open slate with this new piece, and which has allowed me to dive into an area of land management that I thought I'd never be able to get into. And so it's fun, very fun to do that. And so,
well, let's start at the beginning.
A lot of deer numbers. And so it's fun, especially when I've got little kids coming up and I look at what the future holds for this piece. That's what I'm most excited about.
Well, let's talk about going to a new spot like that and looking at the property, and then deciding, do you say, okay, this is how many acres we got, this is how many deer I think we've got out here. What goes into your line of thinking and your strategy? Do you create kind of a refuge in the middle that you don't venture into? What's your plan there?
It's continuously evolving, especially as you learn who your landowners are. And it's only 125 acre. I shouldn't say only, but it's 125 acres. So as I briefly touched, you can't manage an entire deer herd on 125 acres. Sure. It's going to be you and the adjoining 700-800 acres, however you want to look at it. But so that's multiple landowners. So as I've gotten to know them, it's kind of played into how I treat that property too, and you can use them to your advantage, meaning how you access ingress, egress, as far as to and fro, where you set your food plots up, and then what you do leave to a sanctuary. I feel like I may be a little bit too cautious when it comes to stepping onto a new piece. I really am an outside in kind of guy, and I rarely get in, especially on a small piece. When you want to keep those deer there for as many hours of the day as possible, doesn't take much intrusion to really chase those deer out. And so using your borders for access, using any topography for access, and always keeping in mind where are those deer coming from and where are they going to, and are you going to cross that path on your way out? Because if you cross that path on your way out, or if they get downwind of you on your set, boy, it's not going to take long, and those deer are either going to use a different piece or they're going to turn totally nocturnal, and your deer sightings are going to go way down. So I would use your borders to your advantage, because your neighbors are going to be likely using their property. So you might as well make your disturbance on that border where you're likely going to have disturbance from a neighbor, and keep as much of your property as an oasis as possible. That's the way I kind of treat our property the best I can.
Taylor, do you get into the growing food plots and positioning them and managing land down where you're at too?
Yeah. And my old man kind of got the seed planted, started food plots before I really even got serious in bow hunting. So that kind of put me on the right track. But similar to Tyler, we have a center core, we call it, and we kind of hunt the perimeter of it. Recently, my change in strategy has been to watch how the neighbors are moving around, where they're moving food plots or throwing up muddy towers. One got real close to what I would call my little piece of the heaven, and so I backed out, and I'm hoping that the area I'm leaving untouched is going to keep them deer in, or he's going to walk and push them over to me. But yeah, and then I'll arrange the food plots as so too, because I had one right up against the fence, and now I bumped it over on the other side of the finger, thinking that I can keep them on our side a little bit longer.
Interesting. I didn't really, obviously you think about your neighbors when you think about deer hunting, but I'd never really put that much thought into the neighbors' movements as much as how you position your property.
Yeah, I know, like our new piece, I've essentially got, so 125 acres, probably about 70 acres of it I would consider sanctuary. Wow. And I've got about 10 acres of broken up food plots on the eastern third of it. And the sanctuary is all on the western third. There's no other food plots on the neighbors. There's just ag fields and pasture ground and timber and whatnot. But so I do allow our sanctuary to be bordered by them, by the neighbors, but at the same time, it's not worth me diving even around those edges to get in there. I'm going to allow the neighbors to kind of shape the movement of the deer herd and create the sanctuary and the movement in my general direction. And I feel like, man, in any given night in September and October, even on the cold front night early in the year, to have 30 to 40 deer come out is nothing out of the ordinary. And I truly feel you only create that situation when you allow a large portion of your property to be generally undisturbed, especially come mid-August, then on to not go in there whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So when you're looking at that property and you say this is going to be the sanctuary, are you looking mainly like for bedding cover, or what do you identify as the best area for the sanctuary?
Well, for us, I think the way it laid out, what our best option was the center. So then we had all the options, like Tyler's saying, of coming in from the outside and kind of maybe bumping them, if you do, into your core instead of through your property and onto another. So that's how we strategize. We have a couple roads that run through our property and along the side, and from them roads, it's up bluffs. So I put stands where I can park reasonably, and then just up. Once I get on top of the hill, that's where my stand is. So basically, creep up over the crest, see if anything's in the plot, sneak up into my stand, and I'm in. And so getting out's even easier.
Do you go on top of the hill so when you shoot a deer, you just have to drag it downhill at that point? Or
Ideally, yeah, into the buckthorn.
down in the bluff country down there, I mean, how are you putting food plots? Do you have openings to plant food plots? Or are you taking some trees down to create some clearings? Or how are you managing that type of property?
Yeah, ours has some CRP, I'd say 20 acre chunk, and then the big 90 acre ag field with trees surrounding it with the bluffs, the run of the terrain. But yeah, it's just jumping in there, I guess.
Do you have a type? What are you planning down there? And I'm curious to see if what you're planning, is it different than what maybe Tyler's planning up a little bit further north in the state, or maybe is it all about the same, or do you guys plant stuff that grows throughout different times of the season, or what are you guys planting?
Well, typically it'll just be a late fall plot where I throw down brassicas and also toss in clover, which will come up in the spring, which works out great. But with the corona this year, we were able to get a bunch of corn planted, so I'm excited for that.
Interesting. Tyler, how about you?
It's a little bit of everything. Ideally, you want to have a majority of your stuff that's going to be palatable or available late in the year, because up until you get your few frosts in September, sometimes early September, like we had this morning, or typically first part of October, there's so much browse for those deer during the summer months and early fall. So I think spending too much time on having so much available early on in the year. Don't get me wrong, it's good. It's good to have good kill plots, especially in the timber leading out to big ag fields. But we do a lot of corn and beans, and then do a portion of turnips, radishes. I've gotten into a little bit of the rye here late in the year. I think a lot of us have probably seen or heard of Jeff Sturgis. He's kind of had some good ideas as far as different green plots to do, no-till methods I've been dabbling with for a few years now, and so kind of it's a good trial and error to see what works. It's funny how some years a turnip radish plot will be dynamite, and other years it's like they don't even touch it. And so I had a little bit of mixed results with that. Been doing sugar beet, small areas on both properties here the last few years. It's a tough crop as they're tough on the dirt, and they are very prone to disease. Like ours up in Pelican, I was on virgin soil, and they have great big bulbs and they have great big leaves until about the first part of August, and then some sort of disease got into them. And I still got the bulbs, which is fine, but my green foliage is now gone. But having a nice green plot, especially if it survives a frost, like I've got some peas coming up and some rye that's coming up right now. For us up here, with the soybeans getting smoked with this frost the last couple of nights, boy, I tell you what, a good green field in mid-September might just be super, super dynamite when those beans are in that transition of turning golden brown.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that question, Brad, about openings, clearing openings in the woods. I did that probably 8 years ago, and looked great. I had shot deer in there before. It was just kind of a grassy opening. I opened it up a little bit more, and the deer actually wouldn't come in it when I was hunting them. They would go around it, and so switched strategies, jumped over there, and connected with my first 150 inch. So you can use it that way, but keep your strategy open for changing, and that not necessarily sitting on the plot, but what they do to maybe check it out. And this year, coincidentally, my brother is doing the same thing, so it'll be interesting how that works out for him.
How many stands do you guys like to have? Say, what do you got? 125 acres, Tyler?
So that one piece is 125, and again, I've been hunting it from the outside in. Honestly, right now, as we sit today, I only have 4 sets on that property, by design, to still learning the deer movements. And it does set up in a sense where there are only a few key spots that you can get in and out of safely. As the habitat grows that I've planted with trees, native grasses, as that starts to become more established, I think there'll be a couple more sets available. We have 80 acres up in Pelican. We've got 5 sets on that, but a couple of them might only be a one-time-a-year set as they're a little bit deeper in the timber. That'd be a mid-rut hunt. So,
is it more important to set up where you can get in and out a little bit easier, or having different stands for different wind directions?
I think it's access. I start with that and then adjust accordingly. Usually by us, it's prevailing northwest, I'd say 50% of the time. And that's how I go about it. Honestly, I don't even know how many stands I've put up. I got my core, I'd say half dozen, and then they're sprinkled everywhere. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, you brought up that frost too. What do you guys think is going to happen to the crops that are out there right now? And I mean, You think farmers got in a little bit earlier this spring? I know in a lot of areas where I'm at, they were in earlier. I've had some farmers tell me the harvest could be kind of a traditional on-time type of harvest, but I'm beginning to think it might be a little bit early, even getting some of these beans out in different areas. What do you think that's going to do to some of this deer movement out there?
I'm not a farmer, so I don't want to speculate on what's going to happen, but I do have a lot of farming friends. I was on the phone with one this afternoon north of Fergus here a couple hours, and they had obviously a very hard frost. And some of the he was talking with a gentleman this morning, the beans that were still green and just starting to turn, there's an estimated 40% potential loss on their yields on those beans because they're just so early on in the game. They're a later variety bean, maybe, as well as maybe got in just a little bit later than they had planned to. I mean, nobody plans for September 8th and 9th frost. And so those beans, if that's a 7% loss, that's a giant loss. He said most fields, if they haven't turned golden brown, they're thinking in the single digits loss. But when you start talking 4 to 5 bushel on marginal yields already, it's tough. It's tough for them. Corn-wise, I think they're just fine with corn. I mean, I don't think that's not an issue. They're already filled out and denting it. Gonna be some monster crops out there.
Right.
Yeah, down by us, I think it's going to warm up again. It hasn't gotten into the 30s at all, but they are talking about having it out before first gun season down here. So that could be good, could be bad. We'll see.
Well, it's going to change. It always changes things when that crop comes out. As somebody mentioned to me, described it as having, it's essentially a forest when that corn is standing, and it's like taking a giant, forest out of a section. So, going to alter some movement, obviously, and change things a little bit. This year's been weird for so many reasons, but fairly dry, obviously, but a good, decent spring. I know we just saw the pheasant forecast for Minnesota. I think 146% increase.
How are you going to stop? How are you going to stop what you're doing to bow hunt when you see those numbers? But I saw that. I've been wanting to ask you that.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going to sit at deer stand with that amount of pheasants around.
Well, I'll just pheasant hunt from the bow stand. Pheasant walks underneath. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm surprised. Like, we all knew it was going to be an increase. I had some of the guys from Pheasants Forever on a couple of weeks ago, and some farmers and different people out in South Dakota talking about numbers. We all expected an increase in numbers, and we knew it was going to be a good year. Last fall was a good fall for the region, and then winter was a little tough at first, and then it kind of mellowed out, and then spring during the nesting season was pretty good. And I just happened to be driving around the other night and saw triplets running around behind a nice doe. So I gotta think that the whitetails had a pretty decent spring as well. What do you guys think we're going to see out there September 19th when you climb up into the stand? You think you're going to see a lot of deer out there? You think it's going to be a good year?
For us, I think it's going to be right around the same as last year. The one concern I've been seeing on cameras is not so many fawns making it, over and over, and a lot more coyotes, which we've been trying to put a dent in those, and they just keep coming. I'm concerned about that. They're
kind of relentless. Tyler, are you seeing that up there?
Yeah, I can't say I've seen a downfall in the amount of fawns. There's a lot of twins and a couple sets of triplets that I have seen. Predators are always on my mind as well. Even this spring, I think it was on May 10th, had a picture of a mountain lion, and it looked like a giant male. It was a big, broad-shouldered mountain lion.
In Otter Tail County?
Yeah, it was east. That was, like I said, it was right between Deer Creek and Bluffton.
Really?
And until that photo that I had never heard of a picture. With all the cameras in the woods, I got to believe people are going to get pictures of them. And people have been crying cat for a number of years now. And Jason Ziegler with Whitetail Properties, he had a picture of one end of March in northeastern Otter Tail County. And so that was the first legitimate picture I had seen of one in our general area, or Minnesota for that matter. Not to say they haven't been here, but so that animal, I'm glad didn't stick around, because I feel like those cats can take care of some serious amount of deer.
Yeah.
We are on the fringe of timber wolves. They typically don't show up until January, February when the deer are herded up, and they definitely change the dynamic of things. They definitely put the deer on edge. And there's a few coyotes. I know there's a lot of guys in our area who do run dogs in the winter and do a serious damage on those coyotes, which is great, and it's awesome to have that in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, you're a little bit of a predator hunter, aren't you?
Yeah, I try to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Kids and careers and stuff, as you guys all know, it eats into some of that time that we might have otherwise done differently in the past.
They will alter your movements as well.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Absolutely. What about, I was up in Thief River Falls for a couple of days here this week, and that northwestern part of the state is such an interesting area because it's kind of right on the edge of prairie and timber, and it's kind of that transition area, but to me, it looks a little bit more prairie, but you got moose, you got elk, you got black bear. You have a bunch of animals that you don't really see, at least down in my part of the woods here, part of the prairie here. Do you see black bear you see black bears where you're at, don't you, Tyler?
Yeah, I've got, besides elk and moose, I've had everything else on camera pretty consistent. I mean, mountain lion just one time, but we've got a lot of bobcat. Timber wolves, like I said, that mountain lion, deer, turkeys. But I haven't seen a moose or an elk. Do a black bear on camera up here. But yeah, like you say, it is a very diverse part of the state up there.
It's cool.
Talk about a couple of gigantic bulls getting taken
right
in the last couple of weeks.
Saw that.
Gosh,
giants.
Yeah, I remember a few years back too, talking to some of those guys up there, and they found, I think this happened like in 06 or 05 or something like that. They found one that had died, and I can't remember if it was natural causes or if it got hung up on a fence or what happened, but they said it would have been like a world record.
That was that one that tipped it, tried to jump that fence, and it was caught upside down.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't remember the story.
Yeah, they got it unstuck, and it was so exhausted by the time they got it unstuck, it actually wandered in the timber and ended up dying.
That's what it was.
But yeah, it was a giant.
I got a buddy up there. I asked him, I said, do you get a tag? I mean, he knows exactly where all the elk are, and he's got access to the land. I'm like, do you ever apply for tags? He's like, no, I should probably do that one of these days. Are you kidding me? You got access? You know where the animals are? Get a tag, man. Jeez.
Well, it's like that bull that Lacey shot here most recently. Before that picture floating around the internet, my cousin's wife sent me a text message showing me that picture of that bull.
Oh, really?
And her parents, that was shot on the property adjoining theirs, their timber. They've got these bulls on camera all the time, I guess. So if I get drawn, I know where I'm going to
go. Yeah.
It's so wild to think about that being in Minnesota. I hope the Northeast plan moves forward and they start putting those animals there. And honestly, I think they could probably they'll have to probably take them from the Northwest herds and move some over just because of CWD travel restrictions and all that stuff. But I'm sure some of those people up in the Northwest probably won't mind if they lose a few of those animals to the Northeast. And I feel like so many people in the Northeast are welcome. Like, bring them over. Come on over. They don't have as much agriculture up there, so there won't be as much damage from those big animals. But I would like to see it. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but I would like to see a large number of animals up there. And you guys don't have to give away your secrets of what you guys are seeing on trail camera, but are you guys got a buck in mind for this fall yet?
Yeah, I got a nice 8-point that I had in my sights Christmas Day, and my old man had cleaned the muzzleloader and the breech plug wasn't threaded at all the way, so I couldn't cock the hammer, and off he ran. Well, luckily his shed was the first one I found, and I already got a picture of him, so that's my target buck this year.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I got a couple that have got me really interested. It's fun to watch them grow up and get to a point where you're ready to shoot them. So the shift has definitely started. I feel like on Saturday morning there was a bachelor group that came through. They were all velvet. Saturday night they came through and they were all hard horned. And then there was also one deer that I had seen last year, had one picture of him early July, and he showed up on Sunday shedding his velvet on camera. And so it's
cool.
They're starting to shift. Yeah, it's super cool.
Well, that's one thing I haven't had the opportunity to do yet that I'm hoping I can do in the next couple of years is have a property to manage, and actually be able to hunt specific deer and put food plots in. To me, I think that's one of the most exciting things about bow hunting, and people always are like, how can you just sit in a stand, that many days all the time, and whatever. I'm like, man, all the things you see when you're sitting in one of those stands. I mean, it's not just about killing deer all the time. A lot of times just being out there and seeing nature a little bit. And when you can do it on your own property that you've, whether you bought and paid for it, or your permission for it, or you're leasing it, whatever, it's property that you've been able to make your own and make it the way you want it as much as possible. You've picked out deer and you've studied the landscape and you've planned, routes and hung stands and done all that. Man, that's got to be the most rewarding part of bow hunting out there.
Yes, sir.
And especially when you can make it work out. Well, guys, I really appreciate the time. Good luck this season. Is there anything else deer related that you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
No, good luck to everyone out there, and obviously stay safe and enjoy it. It's been a crazy year.
Yeah.
Same. Let's make it a good one.
Taylor, let's talk about Bluffland just real quick before we go. Bluffland Whitetails. Obviously, you weren't able to do the banquet this year. How is fundraising, membership? Is there anything you're encouraging people to do in the meantime, since they couldn't come and see you guys in person?
Yeah, well, we sent out a little membership drive. We did our pre-banquet raffle, which was successful, and we're thinking about doing something like that here during season. But yeah, we're gearing up for the season, helping out with carcass dumpsters again. Sounds like that's going good so far, and any other way we can help. That's what I think we're meeting with Barb here in the next couple of weeks to go over maybe some changes for next year. So,
all right, Tyler, have you had much CWD up in your neck of the woods?
Cross our fingers, we haven't had any confirmed cases in Otter Tail County. There was one doe on a farm in, was it Douglas County, just south of us here last year, was there, I believe. And then otherwise to the east over in that Crowing unit over where they had that confirmed case. So hopefully we can keep it at bay. I think we all probably know it's inevitable that it'll probably be everywhere at some point in time in our lives. I just hope that we can stave it off as long as possible and learn more about the disease itself. I think there's a lot of speculation that maybe shoots us in the foot before we actually know the answers. And I think there's a lot of that going on in our world today.
A lot of questions. Agreed. Absolutely. I wish we had more answers. All right, Taylor, Tyler, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
This has been the Finding Fur and Feathers Hunting Podcast, part of the Sporting Journal radio family. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts or visit us at findingfurandfeathers.com.
Looking for fall adventure? Might as well pick a place with over 1,000 lakes. Otter Tail County, Minnesota is in the middle of everywhere, offers a simpler pace, and has something for everyone. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today. As we all navigate through the tough times of 2020, finding new ways to enjoy summer has become a way of life. If you're searching for the perfect getaway this summer, look no further than the walleye capital of the world, Lake of the Woods. Fish the Rainy River, Big Traverse Bay, and don't forget you can still experience the uniqueness of the Northwest Angle. For your best chance to catch big fish, Go where the big fish are. Lake of the Woods. Plan your trip at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. If trophy lake trout and monster northern pike are on your list this summer, book a trip to Tasman Lake Lodge in northwestern Saskatchewan.
Everything from numbers to big fish.
See pictures, videos, and more at TasmanLake.com.
This is quite the fishery.
Our 5-star chef will feed you well after a day of chasing giants on Tasman Lake.
Dream come true.
Get rates, dates, and more of what you can expect
It could be the best fishing you've ever had in your life.
at TasmanLake.com. That's TasmanLake.com. Tasman Lake Lodge is a proud partner of Tourism Saskatchewan.